Now, if you missed last week, we are in a series today that I'm really excited about called Bad Advice. And Bad Advice is kind of a weird series title because if you're like me, I don't come to church for bad advice. In fact, I've got enough of it on my own, right? And so what we're doing is for these few weeks we are together, we are looking at bad advice that all of us at some point or another will struggle with. And we're looking at it through the lens of what would God say about it. And here is where we started last week. We started by saying the first piece of bad advice that all of us wrestle with is this idea that all of our money and all of our possessions are for us. And the reality is all of us tend to think that everything we earn and everything we get is all about making me happy and making me more comfortable. But what you find in the Bible is that we're not actually owners of everything we have. God's the owner. We are just stewards over everything that we have. And so we defined that last week. If you missed it, do me a favor and go online to access.tv/messages. I'd love for you to watch that and check that out. Now today, I want to go through a completely different piece of bad advice for you. And to set this up, this is my favorite time of the year. This pre-holiday, before we get into all the fun holiday stuff, I love this time of year because the weather gets a little cooler. All the holidays are still ahead of us. Football is getting more and more meaningful. Like there's just so much fun stuff happening right now in this season of the year. So a couple days ago, after work, it was really cool outside. And my wife said, hey, Jason, let me pick you up from work and we'll bring the kids and we'll go out to the park. So we did, and we went to this park and it was amazing. And Liz took my two boys and they went off somewhere. And I had Ella, my sweet, precious little 2-year-old girl, and she wanted to swing. And so I put her in the swing and I was swinging her and she was just loving life. And then I pulled my phone out because I got a text, and I checked the text and I kept pushing her and swinging her. And out of the corner of my eye, I could see this little boy come running in, and I had this moment of panic of, he's gonna get hit, and it was perfect. Like if we could have had this on film, we could have been on America's Funniest Home Videos, because the boy comes running in and Ella just completely crushes him and sends him flying. A little like 3-year-old boy. And the boy stands up and I'm like, I'm getting sued right now. And the boy stands up and he shakes it off and he goes, it's okay, it's not your fault. I was being stupid. I knew it was gonna happen. And then he just walked away. And I was like, who are your parents? Like, what kind of self-awareness is it that a 3-year-old can think like that? I know adults who don't have that kind of reasoning. And I was like, have a good day. And he just went and he disappeared. He might have been an angel. I don't know what happened, but it's interesting how many of us in life, some of our worst moments, some of our worst decisions, we knew it was coming. We knew it was going to happen as a result of our bad decision, and we still walked into it. And then we tried to find something else or someone else to blame as a result of it. I'll never forget, some years ago, I was working at a different church. I was doing some graphic design computer work for a church. And I got a knock on my door, and I opened it, and it was one of my best friends. And this guy is a guy that I went to college with, and we were buddies. We worked together. And he came into my office, and his eyes had bags underneath them. You could tell he'd been crying. And I had never seen this guy cry before. In fact, this is one of the tougher guys that I've ever met. And he came walking into my office, and he shut the door. And as soon as you heard the door click as it shut, his eyes began to just bawl. Like he lost it in my office. And I said, man, what is wrong? And my man was like ugly crying. And he goes, and he had to collect himself. And it took a few seconds to tell me what was wrong. And he goes, I just came from my parents' house, and my mom and dad just sat me down to tell me that my dad had an affair. And it's hit me like a ton of bricks, because this was probably the first time as an adult that someone that I knew or someone that was close to it had had an affair in their family. And it just devastated me in this moment. I was devastated for my friend. And I said, well, what happened? And he told me some of the story, and he goes, his dad just sat him down and he said, son, sometimes adults make mistakes, and sometimes we do things we wish we couldn't do. And I bought into the lie that the grass is greener on the other side. And that's the lie we're going to talk about today, that the grass is greener on the other side. He said, son, I just bought into the lie that the grass is greener on the other side, and I made a dumb choice. And my friend said this to me, and my mind kind of raced, and I said, well, I don't think he made a bad choice. The reality is he probably made a whole series of bad choices to get to this moment. See, come to find out, the person who he had an affair with was the person who cut his hair. And he'd been going to her for a long time, and she cut his hair. And when you sit with someone who cuts your hair, you have conversations. And so one conversation probably went a little too far, and it maybe lingered a little too long. And maybe there was some joking. Maybe the woman had some marital problems, and he was kind of the hero who helped through those problems. And maybe eventually that as they were leaving, a hug kind of lingered a little too long, a touch got a little bit too intimate, and things begin to happen. Like, you don't accidentally have an affair. You don't just like accidentally wake up, have a cup of coffee, have an affair, go to work. It doesn't happen like that, okay? So he made a series of bad decisions, and ultimately it ended up costing him significantly. What you don't know in the story is the husband, the man who had the affair, had been a pastor for 30-something years. And I think to myself, how is it possible that people, like anybody, can throw away their future? How is it possible that anyone can make a decision like that? And the reason is this: all of us are hardwired with these appetites. We're all hardwired with these desires to do something with our life, to make something of our life, to be known, to be successful, to have people know our names, to have people cheer us on. All of us are hardwired in a way that we crave intimacy and meaning out of our life. And the problem is our appetites, if they're controlled, they can be powerful, but if they go rampant, if they get off-road or off-course in our life, they can devastate us. And some of you know this. It maybe not from you, but your parents, they split up because mom had a problem with prescription pills, or dad had a problem with drinking too much. Maybe you grew up in a home where your home is split up and you're devastated because your dad found a girlfriend on the side, or your mom got emotionally attached to someone and ran off with them. And all of us maybe know someone like that. Maybe it's hit close to home for you. But the reality is all of our appetites, if we're not taking care of them, they have the potential to make us buy into the lie that the grass is greener on the other side. And if I can just get what's over there, I'll finally, once and for all, be happy. My soul will be satisfied. And so the result is we chase things that we shouldn't chase. Now here's what you need to know. All of us have a desire. We have these appetites, and many of them are good. In fact, like if you think about your appetites, every man in the room has an appetite for food and for sex, and there's probably lots of them. Food, there's probably a lot. There's just two, actually. There's only two for men. But for everyone else, here are some other ones. We have the appetite for progress. We want to move the ball down the field. We want to be successful in our careers. We have the appetite for responsibility, which is we want people to see our abilities and to trust us more, and to trust us to grow the business and to do the kind of things we need to. Others of us have an appetite for respect. We want people to see us and to know how good we are, and as a result, we want them to honor us with respect. The others have a appetite to win. We're just not satisfied unless we're winning. And maybe you're like me at times. I either win or I stop trying altogether, right? Because I can't lose that way. And then others of us, we have an appetite for love. Like God hardwired into us a desire, an appetite for intimacy. Others of us have an appetite for acceptance. We want people to like us and to receive us. We have an appetite for fame, which is not just to be known, but to have people that don't even know us know about us. Others of us have an appetite for recognition, which is beyond being known. It's to see the gifts in you and then to applaud them. Others of us have a desire to be envied. We have an appetite for people to see us and to want what we have, to want our car, to want our wife, to want our family, to want our house. We have this desire to be envied. Others of us have a desire just for stuff, for things. We want to accumulate more, buy more, and get better and better and better things. It's the reason that you're not satisfied with the iPhone 3 anymore. Like you have to keep upgrading. It's because eventually there is this part in all of us that has this desire, this appetite for just more and more and more stuff. Now here's the reality. None of these things in and of themselves are necessarily terrible things. None of the things on this list are necessarily evil, wicked, or awful things. They're just not really. The problem is when our appetites get misdirected, it causes us to really miss out on so much in life. In fact, let me say it to you like this, and here's the reason today matters. You have no idea what hangs in the balance for you as a result of how you handle your appetites. You just don't. You have no idea the desires in your heart that will be missed. You have no idea the dream that God has for you that you'll forfeit if you allow your desires to get sidetracked. And today I want to talk to you about our appetites. Now here's 3 things about appetites that all of us have to know up front. The first thing is this. Our appetites were created by God. God created them and sin distorted them. God created your appetites and sin distorted them. Now here's the reality. I told you the story about my friend whose dad had an affair. There is nothing wrong with the desire for intimacy. In fact, God hardwired you that way. In fact, as a pastor, one thing that frustrates me is when I hear stories of churches that tell people, especially teenagers and college students, that like sex is bad and sex is gross and intimacy is wrong. It's like we're hardwiring people the wrong way. Sex is created by God as a gift for you. In fact, I've said this over and over and over again. Sex is a gift from God for you, and if you don't believe in God, the fact that God made sex for you is a reason to worship Him, right? Like, I said that one time, and a man came up to me after service, and he goes, "Let me just tell you, my wife and I worshiped this morning." I'm like, "Shut your mouth." Shut up. Ain't nobody need that. What are we talking about? So God creates the gift, and yet sex and sexuality outside of the context that God created it for only leads to devastation. You've seen it, you've experienced it. I don't need to give you stories. In fact, I could give you stories. I could tell you stories of famous people, politicians. Check this out. I don't know any, or certainly not many pastors who are no longer pastors and no longer in ministry because their theology got really weird. I could name for you dozens and dozens and dozens of pastors who are not pastors anymore because they took the gift of sex and sexuality and they just took it off course. They believed that the grass was greener somewhere else, and so they got their needs met somewhere else. The grass is never greener on the other side. It's greener where you water it. And God created your appetites. God created your desires. He created them, and yet sin has this way of distorting them. The second reality of our appetites is this, that our appetites are never fully and finally satisfied. Your appetites and my appetites, they're never fully and finally satisfied. Let me say it to you like this. A couple weeks ago, some very good friends of mine and I, we all went to a restaurant called Texas de Brazil for dinner. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to Texas de Brazil, but it's kind of like what I imagine heaven is going to be like someday. Texas de Brazil, if you've never been, it is this restaurant where they have an amazing salad bar and they have amazing sides, but that's not what it's about. They have all you can eat amazing steak and ribs and sausage. I mean, you name it, it's all you can eat, and it is all amazing. And every time I go, I eat until I hurt. Now, can I give you like some side advice? This is just pastoral because I love you. Thanksgiving is right around the corner, and Thanksgiving is a day when we all like to just go wild and eat a bunch of stuff. You can eat, and usually when you eat, there's a point when you think to yourself, I've had enough, I'm full, right? Everybody's had that moment before. Now, wise people know to stop there, but for the rest of us, it's usually just like, I'm just gonna have a couple more bites. Sometimes I'll eat at a restaurant and I'll think to myself, well, that's not quite enough for another meal, so I'll go ahead and just eat it now. You know what I mean? Like, you just kind of push through that. And usually when you get to that point, your stomach starts to hurt a little bit. Now, listen to your pastor here. If you push through that, there is a point when your back starts hurting, and you should really tap the brakes there. And so I go to Texas de Brazil with my friends, and I mean, I'm straight up wearing stretchy pants at this point to go to Texas de Brazil, and I eat until my back hurts. And after the meal is over, I literally say out loud, I don't think I'll ever be hungry again. You ever had that? I've eaten so much, I don't think I'll ever want food again. And the next morning, I got up and I had breakfast, and I didn't even think about it, because there is this understanding that when it comes to food, no matter how full I get, there will always be a day when I'm hungry again. In the same way, the way God created you, you have these appetites, and they're not bad necessarily, but they'll never be fully and finally satisfied. It's the reason you always have to upgrade to the newest thing. It's the reason you always want a better car, a better house. It's the reason that when you're trying to find a spouse, you're always looking for a better option, a better upgrade, until you feel like you're finally going to be satisfied. The problem is this, is that all of our appetites are never fully and finally satisfied. This is the reason that sex and sexuality can be such a dangerous place. This is the reason that pornography can be devastating in your relationships. You say, why is that? Because the appetites you have are never finally and fully satisfied. The third thing is this. Your appetites always whisper now and never later. Your appetites always whisper now and never later. Now let me tell you this. Marketers understand this. The people whose job it is to sell you things in stores, they understand this. If you walk through the mall and pay attention, what you'll see is this. Every store is having some sort of sale, and the sale is never indefinite. I've never been to a store that says 30% off forever. They don't do that. They say 30% off through Friday, or clearance, half off of the lowest marked price through Friday. And the reason they say through Friday is they understand if you don't feel pressure to make the decision now, you'll just probably walk away from it. Well, this is what our appetites do. Our appetites never say, it's okay, I'll get it later. Our appetites were created in a way where if we don't get it now, if we don't have what we want here in this moment right now, we feel like we're going to miss out. We feel like we're going to miss the opportunity. We don't want to have that kind of depression sitting on us from missing out on the sale where we could save 30% as long as I get it right here and right now. So the question is this: if it's true the things that I just said about our appetites, we have to make the decision once and for all to understand what to do with our appetites. Now, to do this, I want to look at one of my favorite stories in the Bible. It's kind of an obscure story. Maybe you heard it growing up in church. Maybe you've never heard this before, and that's fine. It's a story of two brothers found in the book of Genesis chapter 25. If you have your Bibles, you can go there, but let me set up what's happening in Genesis 25. In Genesis 25, we meet two sons, the sons of a man named Isaac, and they are twins born just moments after each other. The two sons are named Esau and Jacob. Esau and Jacob. Now, though they are twins and though they are born within moments of each other, they are completely different than each other. Esau was more of a hunter. He was more of an outdoorsman. If there was a Bear Grylls in the Bible, it would be Esau. The Bible even gives us this awesome little tidbit about Esau. It says that when he was born, he was covered in hair. So you've got like little Chewbacca baby Esau, right? That's him. Then his younger brother, who was born moments after him. In fact, the Bible says that when Esau was born, his brother Jacob's hand was holding on to his heel. That's how close they were apart. And Jacob was born next, and Jacob was the opposite. If Esau was an outdoorsman, Jacob was an indoorsman. He was the creative, he was the artist, he was always cooking and decorating and whatever these kind of guys do. That's what Jacob and Esau did. They were different than each other. Now, one of the things you have to understand that's so important to the story is this. The story centers around this idea of something called a birthright. Now, a birthright is unbelievably important to understand because we don't really do this in our culture. In that culture, the firstborn son would be given the birthright. Now, the birthright was this idea that carried three special components to it. The first was this. The birthright ensured that the firstborn son who got the birthright would get a double portion of the inheritance. So whenever the mom and dad passed away and they divided up all the assets, if the younger brother got $100, you would get $200 if you had the birthright. If you got $100,000, if the brother got $100,000, you would get $200,000. You got a double portion of the inheritance. The second thing is this. Not only did you get a double portion of the inheritance, but someday when your family had problems, when your family had issues, if your mom and dad were dead, you became the patriarch. That meant you got to be the one to make the decisions. You were the judge, the jury, you were the executioner. You could do whatever you wanted, and whatever you said went because you were the oldest. The third is this. The third level was that there came this also the spiritual blessing that was associated with it. So you got double the portion of the inheritance. You got to make all the decisions moving forward for your family. And there was this sense that God blessed you in a supernatural kind of way. So the birthright was special. It was super important. And in Genesis 25, we find Jacob and Esau, and they're both kind of doing their thing. Now, at this point, they're a lot older. They're not little boys anymore. And Esau is out hunting, and Jacob is doing something. And here's where we pick up Genesis 25. It says, once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country, and he was what? He was famished. His appetites were completely out of control. Esau was famished. And he said to Jacob, quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished. I have to eat something right now. My stomach is turning on itself. Give me some of that red stew. Now, it's an interesting little phrase for you. The phrase for red stew is the word ha-adam in Hebrew. It's the same phrase that we get from the name Adam, the first man. And literally the reason is because of the color. You see, the Bible says that God created Adam from the dirt, from the clay, which would have been red in that culture where they lived. And he's making this soup, this red soup that would be the thing that gives life. And so Esau comes in from hunting and he's like, bro, I am famished. What are you cooking? Holler at me. Let me have a bowl of that. Now, this is interesting. Verse 31, he said, let me have some of that stew. And Jacob replied, first, sell me your birthright. Now, this just seems crazy, right? Why would you sell a birthright for a bowl of soup? But here's the reality. I have learned when it comes to brothers that there is this interesting dynamic when it comes to older and younger brothers. I, in my family, am the oldest brother, and I have two younger brothers. I have two sons now, Joey, who is 9, and Gavin, who is 6. Here's what I've learned. When it comes to brothers, the older brother almost never really needs anything from the younger brother. He's older, he's more established, he has more things at his disposal. But the younger brother always needs something from the older brother. Hey, bro, can I have a ride? Can you take me here? Can I borrow $10? But every once in a while, when the older brother needs something from the younger brother, this always happens. The younger brother always shoots for the moon. The younger brother is always like, okay, I'll make up an example. Okay, older brother's like, hey, dude, I'm going out tonight. Can I borrow $50? $50? You better sell me your car for $50. No, I'm not selling you my car for $50. Fine. Okay, I'll give you $50, but you're my slave for a month. Whatever I say, you have to do. This is what brothers do. No. I'm not going to be your slave for a month for $50. Fine. We have to switch bedrooms. I like your room better than mine. And what happens is brothers negotiate their way down to kind of like a bottom agreeable place. So here you have Jacob and Esau. Esau comes in and he's starving, and he says, listen, I want a bowl of your soup. And Jacob says, that's fine, you can have some of my soup, but first, sell me your birthright. Now the question is, who would do this, right? Who would actually sell their birthright? And the answer is kind of surprising. The answer is, you might. You see, what happens in these moments is we get so hyper-focused on something that we miss what's actually happening. And so Jacob says to Esau that you can have some of this soup, but first you got to sell me your birthright. Double the portion of the inheritance. I get to be the judge and the jury someday, and I get the blessing. I get it all. You got to sell it to me. Verse 32 says this. Look, this is Esau saying, look, I'm about to die. To which I want to be like, really? Like, you just walked in. Like, snack on your hair, your body hair. You got lots of it. You'll be fine. You'll live. It's gruel. You'll be fine, right? Really? You're going to die? No. Look at the rest of the verse. Look, I'm about to die, Esau said. What good is the birthright to me? He begins to justify it away. Now, we read this story and we're like, who would do that? Who would make a ridiculous trade like that? Who would give up the preferred future, the dreams in their heart? Who would give all of this stuff up for a bowl of soup? Who would do that? And I said this a moment ago. The answer is all of us might. The reason all of us might is this. Psychologists and marketers understand this principle. There is a marketing term, a psychological principle called impact bias. Here's what it means. Impact bias takes a simple appetite and it magnifies it out of proportion. What happens is when you get so hungry, when your stomach is so consumed by getting the next meal or the next snack inside, like when this happens, what happens to all of us is nothing else seems to matter. We're so focused on that which we can't have or we don't have in the moment that nothing else matters in the moment. And so for Esau, he's thinking to himself, like, nothing else matters. If I don't have this soup, I'm going to die. And what difference does it matter if I have a birthright if I'm dead? It doesn't make any sense at all. Now, there's another term that marketers tend to use, and the term is focalism. This means a very similar thing, which means this. Focalism focuses our mind on only one thing, and then it blurs everything else out. So it's like if we could drop into the story, if we could like pause the story right here and be like, listen, Esau, Jacob is willing to trade you a bowl of soup for your whole preferred future. What are you doing? Like, wake up. Stop focusing only on the bowl of soup. Like, I understand you're starving, right? But if you can just wait, why would you trade your whole future for this? Now look what the story goes on to say. Verse 33, but Jacob said, swear to me first. So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. He gave up his future for this bowl of soup. Verse 34, then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. Lentils, next verse. And he ate and he drank. And this next part is so sad to me. And then he got up and he left. Now, the reason this is significant to me is this. Esau traded the ultimate for the immediate, and once the immediate was done, it was done. This wasn't like trade me your birthright for a lifetime supply of red lentil soup. This was trade your future for a bowl of soup. And once it's gone, it's gone. I wonder how many of us have made decisions that we wish we could go back and undo. We have moments of regret that we wish we could go back and undo. We have relationships we wish we wouldn't have entered into, financial deals we wish we could undo. We have all these regrets in our past that we wish we could undo. And the truth is, it's long gone, it's over, but it's cost us. It's cost us even to this day. It has cost us so much. Now look at the last part of this verse. It is so sad. It says this, so Esau despised his birthright. He gave it up. He left. He walked away from it once and for all. Why would he do this? Now, there's this part of me that wishes that there was some way for me to like somehow travel back into time, to step into this moment and to try to get Esau by the hairy shoulders and be like, what are you doing? Why would you trade all this? Okay, listen, this is going to sound weird, Esau. I'm from the future, okay? Hence this. Oh, that's my clothes. It's weird. I know it's weird, but listen. Okay, I know the rest of your story. There's going to be a day someday where God uses a man named Moses, who's going to come years and generations after you, to deliver the people of Israel from slavery. And how is God going to introduce himself to Moses? He's going to say, Moses, you don't know me, but I am the God of Abraham and Isaac and Esau. But if you do this, if you take this bowl of soup, it's going to be the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Like, there's going to be a day someday where the New Testament is being written, the second half of the Bible, and it's going to tell the story of a Messiah, someone who's going to come to save the world named Jesus. And when they introduce Jesus, they won't just say there was a man named Jesus who was born. They're going to give his genealogy. And when they do, they're going to say that he was the great, 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 great grandson of Abraham and Isaac and Esau. But if you throw this away, if you trade this out, you're trading not just your future, not just the immediate moment, but you're trading part of your legacy. You're trading all of it for a bowl of soup. And the question becomes again, who would do something like that? Who would trade the ultimate, the dreams, the plans that God has for them? Who would trade all of it for a moment of temporary pleasure? Who would trade the ultimate for the immediate? And the answer is still you and I. All of us would. It's the reason that if we are not careful, we will allow an appetite to control us instead of us controlling the appetite. It's the reason that if we're not careful, we'll buy into the lie that the grass is greener on the other side and she'll make me happy, or he'll provide for me, or at least he'll listen to my emotional needs, or at least she'll be there for me physically. We'll buy into the lie that something else or someone else will make us happy. And when we do, when we trade the ultimate for the immediate, we sacrifice our preferred future. We sacrifice the potential of the dreams that God's placed in our heart. So the question becomes, how do we avoid that? How do we make sure that we're not Esau in the story? How do we make sure that generations from now, when they tell the story of you, they say he was the best man ever? You've never met a woman who was a better mom and grandmother and wife than she was. How do we make sure that we're not the butt of the story, but instead that we get to be the person who lives out the dreams that God has placed in our hearts? 2 words. Here's what we do. We reframe and refrain. Reframe and refrain. Well, let's talk about this. Reframing means we make the decision now to understand what's at stake. We begin to redefine boundaries for ourselves. And the boundaries ultimately give us freedom. You say, what does that even mean? Our boundaries give us ultimate freedom. I do tons and tons of premarital counseling for couples. And I'll sit down with couples and we'll have this whole series of conversation about sex and sexuality. And I say this, it takes years of time to build trust, and it takes a moment to devastate. It takes years to build trust, and it takes one moment, one indiscretion, one bad decision to ruin trust. It can ruin your life in one moment. I tell couples this, in premarital counseling, I say you need to create boundaries here and now for your sex life. And the reason you need to create boundaries is there's going to be a day when your boundaries are put to the test. And if you prioritize, which means prior to that moment, if you decide, you will have the boundaries to understand. This is what I tell people. The way you create boundaries is by understanding what it's going to cost you. What does that mean? Okay, here's how I think about it. If you were to have an affair, and let's say you worked in construction or you were a doctor, it'll cost you something. It'll cost you some of your good name with your family. Maybe it'll cost you your wife. Maybe she'll leave. Maybe it'll cost you your husband. Maybe he'll leave. Maybe your kids, you'll have to split them up and you won't see them all the time like you get to now. It'll certainly devastate them. When you sit them down and talk to them, it'll hurt them. It might cost you your job. It might not. If nothing else, everyone's going to find out about this. People don't get divorced and hide an affair. It doesn't tend to happen. And I tell couples this. I said, so when I think about it from my perspective, here's what I think about. If I had an affair, it would be on the front page of the Lakeland Ledger. Another pastor mess up. If I had an affair, it would cost me my church, the church that my wife and I have given our lives to build. It would devastate this. If I had an affair, I believe that there's some people who would literally walk away from faith in God. Because whether or not they realize it, some people unintentionally put their faith in a person instead of God, which is very dangerous, by the way. But more importantly than that matters. But more importantly than that is I would devastate my wife, my precious bride. I would sit down with my 3 sweet, innocent kids and I would tell them, hey, your daddy is an idiot and he messed up. I would devastate them. And I can't imagine the wake of that bad decision because I traded the ultimate for the immediate. See, what happens when you reframe your priorities is it allows you to refrain from the moments. It creates space for you to have space to actually think. It gives you the space to actually contemplate what this is going to cost me. And what happens is this, when you buy into the lie that the grass is greener on the other side, you will always chase happiness instead of pursuing joy. And God's intention for you is that you find joy. Joy never comes from your circumstances. Joy comes from your heart. So if that's the case, let me ask you this question. What is the place in your life that if you're not careful right now, you're going to sacrifice the ultimate for the immediate? Now, I've used a lot of examples of sex and sexuality because it is so powerful and so volatile. It can destroy a life in a moment. but it could be anything for you. What are the appetites in your life that you've allowed to get out of control? Your need to be wanted, your desire for fame, your desire for recognition. It'll cause you to do ridiculous things. It'll cause you to cut corners and to cheat. Is it your desire to be envied because it'll cause you to cut corners on your taxes or to lie to impress people? Like what are the areas in your life where if you're not careful, you're just going to run your life off course. You're going to devastate your preferred future because you're so focused on the immediate instead of the ultimate. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. In a moment, I'm going to ask every person to close your eyes, just to take a moment to bow your head in humility before God. And in a moment, as I pray with you, I'm going to ask you to just search your own heart and ask God, what are the places in my life that if I'm not careful, I'm Esau? If I'm not careful, I'm trading the best future that God has for me for something temporary. I'm giving up the ultimate for something that honestly, it's a bowl of soup. It's immediate, and in the grand scheme of my life, it'll be like Esau. I ate it, I took care of it, I did it, and then it was over and it's gone. What would it look like for you and I to make the decision once and for all to say, God, I want what's best from you, and I'll never allow my appetites to run me. Would you bow your head and close your eyes all across this room? I'm going to ask you to search your own heart for just a moment. Maybe for you, you just know in your heart right now, there's a place that just comes to mind right now. There's a place in your life where you know you're sacrificing the ultimate for the immediate. Maybe for you, it's a website, it's a habit, it's a drinking habit, it's a pill habit. Maybe for you, it's something involving sexuality and intimacy. Maybe for you, it's pornography. I don't know what it is for you, but I do know this, that you and I can make the decision once and for all. Step away from those things that are costing us everything, to step into the life that God has for us. I'm going to pray for you, Father. This one's so easy to talk about, and it's just so hard to do. God, for so many of us, the reality is our hearts get so consumed by wanting to please others, wanting recognition, wanting people to know us, but wanting to meet our needs, wanting to make ourselves happy, wanting to get the next latest thing, wanting to keep up with the Joneses. We get so consumed by the wrong stuff at times that our appetites get off track and they have the potential to devastate us. God, I pray that we will have the courage to step back from that, to reframe our desires, to reframe our hopes and dreams, to ask ourselves, in light of the call that you have on our lives, in light of the dreams you have for us, what is the wise thing to do? And then give us, God, the courage to actually live that out. God, thank you that you gave us our appetites, and yet sin distorts them. So help us to keep that in check. May we never buy into the lie or the bad advice that the grass is greener on the other side. But may we be faithful. May we be rooted deeply in our lives. And may our lives matter for something more than just something temporary. God, we thank you for that. In Jesus' name.